They're all such hacks, dude. It's just like, and they all copy each other. They just find something that works within the title, and then the other ones see that that worked for them, so then they do the exact same title.
But what are they basing this off? Their feelings?
That's why Netflix can't even compete. Netflix is done.
They're not done.
Done.
What are you talking about?
No, it's just views. It's like once somebody's very popular, especially like in the YouTube space, you just get a lot of clicks off their name.
If you go to Drake's comments or Kevin Hart's, LeBron's, they're getting hate, but they're not hate on me because I'm not successful. You know what I'm saying? Like if I wasn't doing, they wouldn't be hating.
Yeah. I had somebody make like my career was over while I was literally at the peak of my career,
bro.
Like I was doing arenas.
Only to touch on it for a second, but there was a clip I sent to you of Marc Maron and Bobby Lee talking about Maron having contrived beef with me. It wasn't real beef. He was talking about Dave Chappelle. People thought he was talking about me. But what's crazy about it, is both Kalila and Bobby and Kalila in that clip are like, yeah, I remember it. That was awesome.
Yeah, they're like, it's exciting. It was fun.
And it's
I was the audience for that, though, because I was like, oh, this is great.
I had no idea what's going on.
Yeah, but it is fun. It's fun to watch.
But and here's the thing. That's how most people feel. I have like so much disdain come at me from people with little to no means. And it's just like a constant barrage of just like, I'm so poor, I can't relate to anything you say. And I'm just like, okay, I don't know.
So for the past year, we have been witnessing a lot of Rogan Sphere comedians not only get to a peak and then drastically fall off, both in terms of their comedy and their podcast, but also it becomes inevitable that at some point they become so massively successful and rich that it's natural that they also become out of touch. However, when it comes to the Rogan Sphere, they actually become so relatable that they stop listening to their fans and the internet, which is what made them famous, and instead they start only taking advice or feedback from their close, rich friends and people that work for them, potentially creating a massive confirmation bias. And also a lot of people, including Rogan Sphere comedians, will argue that because they're successful and selling out arenas, the criticism isn't really valid and doesn't make any sense. But I think sometimes both could be true. I mean, someone's comedy could definitely be on the decline and falling off, while at the same time they could be writing off their massive success from the past few years.
You'll literally have hundreds of YouTube videos talking about this person fell off and that person fell off. And these are the people that's actually moving shit. You know how many videos I've seen about Joe Rogan falling off?
Bro.
Meanwhile, he's the #1 podcast in the world.
Yeah.
What do we do?
They're all such hacks, dude. It's just like, and they all copy each other. They just find something that works within the title, and then the other ones see that that worked for them, so then they do the exact same title.
However, that only lasts so long, and I actually like to point towards someone like Dane Cook as being a perfect example of a comedian that was massively successful back then, selling out massive arenas, breaking records, selling albums, and was also considered a social media pioneer, which makes sense because, you know, now he's not at the same level. And if you compare him to someone like Louis C.K., it's a whole different story, because even though they both were coming up around the same time, and Louis C.K. also went through a massive cancellation, which made him take a whole year off from stand-up, he still came back and sold out Madison Square Garden, which is pretty wild. And when it comes to Dane and Louis, now there's no doubt who the better comedian is, even though back then you could argue that Dane Cook was the way more massive star. And funny enough, it does seem like if the Rogan Sphere comedians are kind of going through their own version of what Dane Cook went through back then. So in this video, we'll go through Bert Kreischer finally addressing the whole Marc Maron situation, which is really interesting. But on top of that, we'll also take a look at Andrew Schultz's horrible reaction to people making videos about him. So let's get started.
They're all such hacks, dude. It's just like, and they all copy each other. They just find something that works within the title, and then the other ones see that that worked for them, so then they do the exact same title.
But what are they basing this off? Their feelings?
No, it's just views. It's like once somebody's very popular, especially like in the YouTube space, you just get a lot of clicks off their name. Yeah. And then saying something horrible about them is going to induce clicks in the name. And they are powerful, though. They can like set narratives that aren't true. They like make them up out of thin air, and they just push them out there, and people will click on them and they'll get views. And the more views, the more people make those types of videos. I had somebody make like my career was over while I was literally at the peak of my career.
Bro.
Like I was doing
You think I don't see
arenas.
those? That's what the I be wondering. I be trying to make burnout accounts. I mean, like, straight up.
I'm doing arenas in Australia.
I almost.
I dream to fall off if this is falling off.
Burnout accounts. I be about to get under there as radio face. I'm like, what the are y'all talking about?
Yeah.
Like, that's the shit that doesn't make any sense to me. But then I realized something, right? And I realized it when I see people talking about the podcasters that have done these big deals recently.
Oh, yeah.
You know the list I'm talking about. Who's the list? I just had the list. Who's the list up?
And once again, the main argument that people use when trying to defend Rogan's Fear comedians is that because they're selling tickets and have good numbers, that they're massively successful, and therefore the criticism is invalid. And that was pretty much Charlamagne's take when it came to why the criticism against Andrew Schulz didn't make any sense, because you could simply look at the numbers and see that he's rich and successful. But once again, that doesn't really make any sense, because by using that logic, that would mean that no new artist, no new music artist, mumble rapper, or whatever is hot at the time deserves any hate simply because they could be putting out numbers and actually selling tickets. And when it comes to Charlamagne, he was actually a massive critic. And by the way, there's no denying that Charlamagne the God is way tougher and meaner to his guests on his own show than we have ever been to any comedian on this channel.
Do you think there's something going on right now where male podcasters need to like give it to me?
What are you talking about?
Like I went on.
I wonder what you're talking about right now.
I went on Andrew Schulz podcast. And do you know about this?
No.
And he had to be like really hard on me or something. There's something where everyone's like, maybe it's like good numbers. I'm trying to figure out what it is.
I'll tell you what it is.
Sure.
Would you like me to tell you what it is?
Sure.
What's going on at home?
You come in and you tell me that you're lying about something.
What's going on?
Are you shooting? I need to get to the bottom of it.
Are you shooting blanks? Why are you such a grump?
Yes. How am I grumpy?
You have some rage at me, Andrew. This is a new kind of rage.
This is a good defense. Do you think people really have an issue with nepotism, or they have an issue with themselves just not getting a role?
Hollywood's never been like fair. Why should it be?
That's
I
the
mean,
thing.
it's like neither sports.
Now
like,
this is a wild take that the guys don't really appreciate.
I think it's sorry. Can I say something about
No,
Nepo
I
Babies?
was in the middle of a sentence.
I know, but if we're moving on.
but we're not moving on. It's
But
about this.
okay.
It's about this. The Nepo Babies' parents.
Mm-hmm.
And also, when it comes to Schulz, it's a very similar situation, because even though I'm not talking about his comedy, since, you know, it is comedy at the end of the day, I don't think anyone should be offended by that. It is interesting that on his podcast, he doesn't hold back and isn't afraid of punching down and trashing people when it doesn't really benefit the bit or the joke, and it's clearly just done for attention, to get a response and to get clicks. But then when somebody else tries to do the exact same thing to him, he doesn't like it, and instead of actually responding with a good point, he resorts to calling everyone a hack and talking about how we all copy from each other and that we just do it for the views. And I'm including myself in that group. But to be fair, there is some truth behind that. But you could also say the exact same thing about his podcast, and we actually have been saying it for a while, that, you know, his podcast looks exactly the same as every other podcast. They talk about the exact same subjects, and if Andrew Schulz actually didn't care about the views or the appearances, then he could simply just do the podcast the same way that Shane Gillis does his. But now looking back, I'm not sure if Andrew Schulz actually thought that one through. And by the way, don't forget to like the video. It helps out so much, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Who's the list? I just had the list. Who's the list up?
Alex Cooper.
Yeah. Who is it?
Kelsey.
Dax, Kelsey.
Yes, it's a top. Okay, here, yeah, it's a top 5 recent major podcast deals. Boardroom put this out. Joe Rogan, Spotify, 250 million. Alex Cooper, Sirius XM, 125 million. Smartless, 100 million. Kelsey Brothers, Amazon, 100 million. Dax Shepard, 80 million. And what happens is these will get posted, and then literally you'll see like black Twitter, black social media go crazy. And they're like, who the are these people? And we don't know any of these individuals. And how the they got this money over this person and that person? And I'm like, this isn't a race thing.
Yeah.
It's a metrics thing.
Yeah.
If I simply showed you the numbers.
Yeah.
So my point with all of that is, where do you get this shit from? Like, do we actually look at real analytics, or do we just go off vibes?
Just go off of vibes, emotion, what we feel. How can I satisfy how I feel? I'm not getting that deal, so It's racism.
Yeah, it's racism.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, and it's not just them. It's just, that's just how the game works.
Here's the thing, man. This is my mindset. I've always been like this. If there's something that I can actually go look up to show me that it's something other than an ism, you know what I'm saying? I'm going to go look it up.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't think any other channel that does something similar to what we do would ever get offended by a comedian like Schulz calling us hacks. And I am including myself in that conversation because we have been talking about Schulz a lot. However, at least when it comes to this channel, I'm just thankful that we get to do what we do and that people enjoy it. But also, to be fair, we all talk about a very niche subject. And even though, yes, there are tons of podcasters and comedians, there's only a handful of them that have gotten so successful and massive thanks to Joe Rogan, and have actually let their egos get to their head and now are pretty much a completely different person. And so naturally, when something crazy happens within the Rogan sphere, the comedy world, or the podcast world, you know, we all end up talking about it. And by the way, you could also say the exact same thing about the Flagrant podcast, and we have been saying it for a while now, that they all basically copy each other's thumbnails, titles, and topics. Instead of actually trying to do a comedy podcast, they all just hit the main topics that know will get views and get people to react to them. And you could actually go a step farther and say the exact same thing about the entire Rogan sphere, because the way that the Rogan sphere was built was by Joe Rogan essentially having his friends on the podcast, having them blow up, start their own podcast, and then inviting comedians on their podcast so that they could blow them up, and then repeat the cycle until eventually Joe Rogan had a massive multi-level marketing network when it comes to podcasting, which is wild because that is essentially free marketing from the top down.
So, and I think that's what's happened with podcasting is that like the podcast, I think overall numbers will continue to grow. It'll just be like the thing that people consume. It's just part of everybody's life. But the podcast numbers for shows probably will shrink because there's so many hyper specific things you can listen to. This is my basketball, like nuanced basketball science podcast that I listen with JJ and LeBron. Here's my funny basketball pod I listen from Barstool. What I think the reason why there's all these purchases for podcasts right now is because I think the podcast production companies or the iHeartMedias have realized the numbers are going to shrink overall. So we need more podcast total to generate the revenue that we want to make, and the cost for our advertising units, because these places are really advertising agencies, right? Like the Wonderies, the SiriusXMs, the iHeartMedias, what they are is an advertising arm that is going to service the podcast. They go, hey, here's your $20 million. And then we're going to advertise against that and try to beat that $20 million we're paying you. That's the idea. Yeah. Now, the cost to find advertisers for 2 podcasts to 3 is nominal.
Nah, you gotta have that number. You gotta have that network.
What I'm saying is the difference for finding advertisers for 2 podcasts to 3 or 2 to 10 is very different.
Unless you're Rogan. No, Alex Cooper.
Rogans are anomalies.
Those anomalies are different.
But even then, I would say it's even easier to find them advertisers because they're in such demand.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so they're looking at the model. They're going, hold on. If I have my advertising team that's already built in place, if I have 50 podcasts or 100, and I don't need to hire any more advertisers, I might as well have 100. And then each of them is making 100,000 views or 200,000 views. That's actually better than just having 3.
And it is pretty wild how disconnected and out of touch both of them are, because I remember a few years ago when Ari Shaffir was on Joe Rogan's podcast doing a Protect Our Parks, he actually brought up Beige Frequency, and they talked about the videos that he made about comedians doing bad comedy. And I was surprised, at least back then, by their reaction to the whole thing and the way they handled it, because even back then, Joe Rogan did seem more grounded and like he actually understood where the hate was coming from. And if you compare that to what Andrew Schulz said, it's almost like if he doesn't care or just forgot that he's a comedian and a YouTuber, and that, you know, trying to make fun of people or calling out people who are at the top is like the most basic thing to do on the internet. And by the way, when it comes to podcasting and stand-up comedy, you can't deny that it's been a very interesting time for the past, 5 to 9 years, in which being able to write jokes hasn't been necessary or a must in order to be successful, in order to be a successful stand-up comedian. And instead, all you really need is to make Joe Rogan laugh and be good friends with him in order to have a successful career. And so because of that, it becomes even funnier and more interesting trying to expose them when they actually have real serious flaws.
You ever see those porcelain documentaries? Porcelain or Beige Frequency, the stand-up documentaries. They're
what's
great.
that?
Hold on.
What are you talking about?
Whoa.
What is
I don't
that?
know what you're talking about.
Oh, you just lost your November.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk to me.
There are these documentaries about stand-ups, about stand-up comedy. Yeah, Porcelain and Beige Frequency, and they're really, really good, well-researched.
Who made them?
These guys just make them for internet.
Oh, like Norton and Jim Jeffries.
Where are
I
some
have
of
seen
them?
They're
those.
on YouTube.
They're so brutal, man.
They're
Those are
brutal, but they're all
brutal.
dead on. They're not like taking stuff out of context. They're taking stuff in context.
One of them. Now this is funny. I was with my lady, and I DM'd him at it. When I saw they reviewed my special, I was with my girlfriend, and I was like, "You gotta leave the room."
So you could.
I'm gonna watch this, and if this is what I think it is, I'm gonna be upset.
You're a masochist.
Yeah,
They're
I watched
great.
it, and actually the guy was like, "This is pretty good."
Yeah,
So I was like, that means everything.
Well, that's great. They're not hit pieces, but it often is. It rests in the negative sometimes, and it's great.
Rest in
But
the negative.
the thing about what you would do
Gentle.
if you were on the outside is you would do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
You would
True.
especially look.
course.
Who likes to attack heroes more than you do?
I love it.
It's your favorite
I
thing.
love it. When Whitney Houston went down, and Oprah's like
Everybody.
it's
With
like-
everybody. Look, anytime
Whatever
anybody
happened to
dies, I just immediately go and check Ari's Twitter. I'm like, Jesus, sorry. How in trouble are you?
It's because everyone's saying like, "Oh, I'm so hurt by it." It's like, well, shut up.
But the thing is,
But how lame is it to be like, guys, he was amazing. It's so boring. What a boring
I hope
response.
that director. But what if someone is
uh,
amazing?
What?
What if someone was amazing? Who,
It's
do you
just
have
too cliche
do you have a
to be
hero?
like, I love.
understand.
Yeah, I do.
For
I do
you
have
as
some of
a
those guys.
comic.
No, some
as
of
a
those guys
comic.
do hurt when they die, but it's still like,
right.
don't say that.
Like
Like,
Norm.
honest.
Norm.
Yeah,
You didn't shit on
it's
Norm,
a
though.
cheesy post
You
about
did- but
Norm.
You didn't shit on
Ugh.
Norm. You didn't shit on Norm.
No, I said his last words were, "Come see Ari's show." And
is that what you said?
Yeah, I put it
That's
on
very
post.
funny.
Yeah.
Good for you.
fun.
Good.
That's neutral.
That's in character.
Yeah.
That's you can't shit on that guy.
Now, it is important to point out that them talking about Beige Frequency did happen about 3 or 4 years ago, so it's been a while, and there is no way of knowing if they still feel the same way or if they changed their mind now that more videos are being made about them. But one thing we know for sure is that Joe Rogan to this day still talks about not reading comments and ignoring all of the hates and all that stuff. But according to his buddy Bert Kreischer, who was recently exposed by Marc Maron, and it does sound like Joe Rogan is very aware and keeps up with what people are saying about him. And funny enough, on the most recent episode of Two Bears, One Cave, Bert actually addressed the whole situation, the whole drama between him and Marc Maron. And even though he did leave out a lot of details that were very important, at least he did talk about it and didn't shy away from it. If you haven't already, I highly recommend you go watch the video we did covering the whole thing, because he pretty much left out that it was Joe Rogan, the one who sent them the video of Marc Maron talking about a shitty comedian, and he assumed it was Bert Kreischer. And we mentioned this on that video, but unless that was a complete lie, I don't know why he wouldn't mention that again to try and defend himself. And look, what's really mind-blowing is that not too long ago, we were actually talking about how even though the Flagrant podcast was on a decline because of shows focusing on comedy instead of the show, I never thought that the show could ever get to a point like what Two Bears, One Cave went through at their lowest moments. However, after watching or after listening to Andrew Schulz react to some very basic criticism, now I'm starting to think that there is a chance that they could be the next Two Bears, One Cave, especially because if you compare how, back then when Tom Segura lashed out at his own fans, he for some reason thought that it was a good idea, but now it seems like Andrew Schulz thinks it's a good idea to call people that are calling him out hags, which I don't know if that's the best choice. And now looking back, it does seem like Bert Kreischer is the better one at taking criticism, which is insane.
Only to touch on it for a second, but there was a clip I sent to you of Marc Maron and Bobby Lee talking about Maron having contrived beef with me. It wasn't real beef. He was talking about Dave Chappelle. People thought he was talking about me. I've talked to Maron about this. I talked about him in January. We're fine. But what's crazy about it? What's crazy is both Kalila and Bobby. And it was hard to compartmentalize because I went through it. Like I went through people sending me the clip and going, "Yo, he's talking about you."
Yeah.
And I went through it and it bummed me out. But both Bobby and Kalila in that clip are like, "Yeah, I remember it. That was awesome."
Yeah, they're like, it's exciting. It was fun. Yeah.
And it's so crazy that.
But and here's the thing. That's how most people feel.
I was the audience for that though, because I was like, oh, this is great.
I had no idea what's going on.
Yeah, but it is fun. It's fun to watch.
Because it's like you're kind of like it's like a modern day form of gossip, like seeing a clip where somebody is talking about somebody you know, or you think they're talking about somebody you know, and it does be like people do get excited by that because we've shared clips of other people.
Yeah,
this, you know what I mean, and you go like, oh no shit. So I mean I get it. It is like a it's like a version of a reality show. You're like, oh my god, you see this person say this, and then people get like. Yeah, they get some type of rush from that whole thing, for sure. It's gossip.
It's so wild because it does affect you. It affects you. Where like when that was happening, I was really bummed out, and I was with you the day Maron called me, or I called Maron called me, or I called. We were together in Las Vegas. We were together in Vegas. Yeah, and I was like, dude, did you see this? And then we were at the gym, and I was walking back from the gym, and I got back to the room, and Maron called me, and I was like, and then, by the way, it didn't get better because I'm friends with Chappelle. So I'm like, well, okay, cool. I can never share this story. I can never defend myself about this. I just got to let it sit and ripen where everyone thinks that you're shitting on me for doing arenas. And so I was like, I'm not going to go, guys, he's actually talking about David. And then Maron said it. I was like, I can't believe you said that. I don't know why you, but whatever. Mark's Mark, you know?
And funny enough, Tom Segura also tried addressing some of the recent hates, more specifically when it comes to the fans trolling him about the whole thing about the pores. And you can actually tell that it got to him because I feel like that would be something that would be very easy to apologize for and move on, you know, to say that you were trolling or you made a mistake and it got out of control, whatever, when he lashed out at his own fans. But instead, when he talks about it, it seems like if he's talking about some dark moment in his past and he just wants everyone to forget about it. But to be fair, at the very least, he doesn't keep digging himself into a hole the same way Bert Kreischer does, because if you pay attention, Bert Kreischer to this day still brings up the fact that he does arenas to try and justify that he's actually talented, or that is the reason why people hate on him. And funny enough, that is something that now Andrew Schulz is starting to do. Him saying how he does arenas and he's at the peak of his career, and so therefore the videos about him falling off don't really make any sense. But that really just tells that he didn't really watch any of the videos and potentially just read the titles and, you know, thought that it was a hate video.
But it sucks when it's like, it's you. Here's the crazy part, right? Is like, I've been sending you clips of my favorite accounts on the internet or on Instagram are hateful comment sections.
Oh my God.
The comment sections where if it was you, it would hurt so bad. Right. But when it's not you, it's hysterical. Yeah. And I don't read comments because it does affect me. Like it does. I will. It'll bum me out that someone will go, this fat all he does is take his shirt off. Like it's like the dumbest slam that is inaccurate to me. Is like, he's not funny. He never was funny. I go, I had to be a little funny. Like, are we gonna, like, never? Like, can you really say never? Can you really say never? I want to sit that guy aside and go, never. I've never made you laugh. Never.
How did I make you this angry?
Yeah, how did I make you so angry? Like, can we work on us together? Can we get into couples therapy and figure out why you hate me and what I'm doing to make you hate me?
I have so much disdain come at me from people with little to no means, and it's just like a constant barrage of just like, I'm so poor, I can't relate to anything you say, and I'm just like, okay, I don't know what to tell you. I donate to charities. Like, something positive has to come out of this, but it's constant.
It's so funny that when Juvenile got kicked off the plane.
Yeah, what happened there? I don't understand this.
And I thought it was on like CNN, and I was like, wait,
what?
You're going to make me fly with the pores? And I go, did Juvie say that? And it's probably Kevin just making fun of you saying that.
Probably.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I fly with the pores too. I'm a regular guy. I'm with pores all the time. I take the bus. I ride a bike. I don't know what else to tell you, man. Pores are so mad at me.
Who's your favorite designer?
Designer? What do you mean?
Yeah, we don't even know about that, huh? I wouldn't even know about designers.
And once again, we just mentioned how Andrew Schulz isn't afraid of punching down or making fun of someone, even if it doesn't benefit the joke or the show, and it's just to be mean. And the perfect example came to mind, which was the time that he made fun of and laughed at Fresh and Fit getting demonetized. Now, I'm not saying that he's wrong. I don't like Fresh and Fit, and I'm pretty sure what happened was fair. But the point is that it is ironic that when it comes to Andrew Schulz laughing at someone potentially losing their livelihood, it's all fun and jokes. But when somebody makes a video about him or his comedy not being that good while he's at the top completely crushing it and making the most amount of money ever, he doesn't like that and calls people hacks. And by the way, both Andrew Schulz and Charlamagne the God go way harder and are tougher on their guests and the people they don't like and trash compared to what we do in this channel. Because in fact, we actually look at the metrics and how successful they are to make a point about how on paper Rogan's Fear comedians are just massively successful. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, I keep repeating this, but last year in 2023, Bert Kreischer actually became one of the top touring comedians, making it on the list up there with Kevin Hart and Dave Chappelle. I mean, that's absolutely insane. And when it comes to everyone else, Andrew Schulz, Tony Hinchcliffe, Tom Segura, it's just insane how successful they are. So once again, technically they are one of the biggest comedians out there, but when it comes to their stand-up comedy, they're not the best. Because if anything, you could argue that Tom Segura still has the best stand-up comedy special out of the whole Rogan Sphere. But also, for some reason, people forget that at some point, Joe Rogan actually gave Brendan Schaub a massively successful comedy career. I mean, Brendan Schaub shot a comedy special with Showtime. He had a massively successful podcast and was doing everyone else's podcast during the time. And now it's no longer the same. So the argument that just because you're successful, it must mean that you're talented and funny, it doesn't necessarily apply, especially when talking about the Rogan Sphere. But yeah, once again, it was interesting seeing the way that Andrew Schulz reacted to some very basic criticism. And it will be interesting seeing if the Flagrant podcast does actually turn into the next Two Bears, One Cave. At this point, I feel like there is a high chance that it happens, but who knows? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Leave a like and subscribe to support the channel. Dislike if you didn't like the video, but that is all we have for today. See ya.